Phil Harris and Josh Phegan come together in an incredible fortnightly podcast, Dream Big, Move Fast.
A progressive, contemporary conversation on what it takes to be a dynamic thinker, leader, and role model.
Backed with over 2 decades of friendship, trials and tribulations that teach from real-world experience and what it takes to dream big, move fast. Who do we intend to be? Max Dupree. Phil, what are your thoughts when you hear this great quote?
It makes me think about my life. I call it the gap. Josh, I seem to spend my time in the space of the dissatisfaction or frustration of where I am today and where I want to be. Mm-hmm. I am very clear on, of the person that I want to be, and maybe I struggle sometimes in the gap of not quite living up to that expectation of who I want to be. But I think we're all on that journey of saying, this is where I am, this is where I want to be. What do I need to do to become that person?
It's an interesting thing who do we intend to be? It's like, there was actually interesting, I think Dan Sullivan wrote a book called The Gap and the Gain. And he said, the interesting part is that, okay, let's imagine that you see sun setting. And when you see the sun setting, we've got to call that the horizon. And it doesn't matter if I get you to run 100 meters closer, you're not actually closer. And you don't realize how far you've come until you stop where you are and you look back to where you were. And so even if I put you in a jet and I fly you another 100 kilometers closer, you're still not actually closer. And that's the great thing about the horizon, is that there will always be great anxiety between where you are now and where you want to be. And that's a really good thing. But to realize how far you've come occasionally is a good thing to stop and to look back and to see just how far you have actually made it. And I remember the very early days, you've come a long way, baby. And I just see that's a nice way to kind of get onto that.
Well, what you were saying, it reminded me of a guy I follow, Ed Milet. You'd know Ed, great podcast. He has some great guests on there. I think he put up a quote once that said, he talks about being blissfully dissatisfied with where you're at in life, but I think his quote was, I'm not where I want to be, but thank God I'm not where I was. Right? So it's kind of somehow just maintaining that, okay, I'm progressing, but don't be afraid to look back and go far out. Okay, dissatisfaction where you are, but always remember where you've come from.
Yeah. Today we're going to have a great conversation about building enduring brands. This was a really interesting conversation, and it's about positioning and a whole range of those things. But what is a great enduring brand, and how does it actually last the test of time? And there was a great book that was recently that I was reading about Nike, and the amount of adversity. If you've ever read Shoe Dog, you kind of see that. And then Emotion by Design was the latest one I was reading, and it's that whole thing that literally you will go through controversy, and you've got to make the decision about how your brand is going to be representative for the era that it's in, and how does that brand reinvent and or remain timeless. And this is a really important conversation for people to get really clear that, what is a brand and how does it actually work? Now, foundationally, if we were little kids and we were on holidays, mum and dad would say, hey, let's go to Macca's, because Macca's had values about cleanliness. So if you needed to go to the bathrooms, that was a great place to go. It's kind of interesting that if you think about, walking into a Louis Vuitton store, a Chanel store, a Dior store, they put a security guard out the front because they want you to perceive that whatever is on the inside of the store is actually really expensive. Okay, great. Well, so we start thinking about, getting really clear about brand design and what those things look like. The touchable, the feelables. So when someone actually goes to, your point of sale display items, what do they look like? Where do they go when someone scans in a QR code? Is there a QR code on a signboard? All of those things, because you're thinking about experiences. And when they get back to that website, what can they actually do that they can't do on the major real estate portals? So can they buy a copy of a pest and building report? Can they download a copy of the contract? Can they get a copy of the strata report? If they're buying an investment property, is there a panel that goes to show you the projected income on that particular property and whether or not there's a tenancy in play and how that actually happens? So what you're doing is you're really thinking out these brand or consumer experiences in such a way that it then determines the fee that you charge in the lounge room. And if I have a great experience, then ultimately it changes. Now, I've been through one of my favorite little things to do, Phil, on a weekend is an occasion I just go to a couple of open houses and just to stir a few people up. I like to pull a tape measure out mid-open house and just start measuring up. I find that really freaks out the other buyers. But in all reality, I have been to a couple of opens, and I got a text message on Monday after going to this open, and the agent said, "Did you like the house? Why N?" So I just replied back N, and I haven't heard from him since. And so that's an example of brand experience. And so then in my local area, there's a property that was for sale, and there was a sold sticker that went on it, and then naturally, it goes 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, 5 days later, I get a text and say, hey, it's sold on Thursday or whatever it was, and it made this. I'm just like, like automation has kind of come in there, but is that actually the brand experience? And so it's learning how to design an experience that people find really memorable. So we're doing this thing at the moment, and it's big in training. We're calling it 40-40. And so the basic idea is you get the listing. Let's say you get a 4-bedroom listing. You go back through all previous market appraisals that you've done, and you pull out 20 previous market appraisals of 4-bedroom homes, and you ring those sellers and say, hey, guys, by the way, we've got another 4-bedder similar to yours going to market. We're going to track the result, let you know what it makes. And of course, when it sells, we then ring them and say, hey, it's sold and we've got 2 buyers left over. What should we do? And then we then go for 20 people, for example, that own a 3-bedder that would naturally upgrade into the 4-bedder. So we're going to ring them and say, hey, Phil, we've got this 4-bedder. I think you guys should come and have a look at it, because naturally, if you want to go and buy it, then that means that then you're going to bring your 3-bedder to market. And then again, when it sells, we still ring you and let you know the sale price, so then we can work out the gap and or the gain you might need to get yourself in a position that then you can go and do it. So that's 40-40. And that's a great example of what I got to call a consumer insight about how you actually go to build an enduring brand. Now, I was over in London a few weeks ago, and I went to a stretching place I'd never been before, and I thought I'd been on a long flight, it'd be good to stretch. And so I booked in, and they sent me this email, and they said, when you come to the stretching session, please make sure that you wear fresh socks. Now, I was like, geez, that's weird. I hadn't actually thought of that. And then I put extra fresh socks on, and not that I wouldn't have anyway, but like, okay, great. So I started really thinking about it. And then I went in there, and then I realized that when you're laying down on one of those massage beds and they've got your leg up and they're kind of like doing the stretching, your foot is right where their nose is. And so they've clearly thought about that customer moment, so it's not awkward for you or them. And that's what I thought, oh, wow, this is what great brand really is for me, is that brands actually think through experiences and get to service delivery. Now, a bit tired of it, but it's the story. Hey, by the way, you go to Neil Perry's new restaurant, Margaret in Double Bay. Hey, lovely to see you. So, mate, please take your jacket and I'll show you to your table. And would you like some sparkling or still? You'd like the sparkling. And would you like the Antipodes from New Zealand, or would you like the San Pellegrino from Italy? Now there's a choice of sparkling water. That's like $150 a head. There's other restaurants like, can I have water? Yeah, mate, taps in the corner. Oh, mate, any glasses? Oh, no, it's a bubbler. You just drink from there. And so that's about $10. And so what you're trying to think about is that the way that you serve the customer determines what actually happens. And so when we walk into listing lounge rooms, I now have a belief that if I drop you into a shopping center and I say, Phil, I need you to go to either Nike, Adidas, Puma, On Running, Lululemon, Reebok, Adidas, whatever, I reckon that you've already got a choice. So you either go to Nike because you're pulled by the aspiration of Michael Jordan, you've had a previous experience of product and you like just do it in the big whoosh symbol, or you're a bit inflexible and you really like the tights and you go to Lululemon. Now, neither of those are wrong, but they're clearly defining about what it is that they're actually doing. And so my question for you is that when you start thinking about it, how many real estate agents do you think actually get proper brand design is actually great experience design? Versus they just think that it's a logo, a look, and a feel, and no one knows that brand here, so it would never work here, not realizing that great brand experiences can separate, differentiate, and actually build you significant market share.
I think it's a really valid point that you've raised, Josh, and whether you think this is controversial or whether you're in agreement with you, I'm not sure. But I would say that we are in an industry that obsesses over the actual physical, tactile brand. So there's a lot of emphasis on
my photo.
My photo and my business card and my letterbox drop and my calendar, or down in the paper. But then all of a sudden, so when we start talking brand, and so we're so obsessive over that. But yet you get an SMS saying, "Did you like the property? Yay or nay?" And so the actual brand experience, so the actual customer experience, my perception of that brand. I went to the website, and by the way, I think if you've got kind of $200,000 to spend, if you're a startup company down in real estate, if you're prepared to spend not even $200,000, probably if you've got $100,000 to $200,000, you can go see Steve Osborne, right? Down at
identity marketing.
Identity marketing, right? And so, just go and drop off. And these are my 4 favorite brands in the marketplace right now. And here's an example of 4 brochures, 4 boys. I mean, you're going to get a great brand. It's not hard to have a
look and a feel.
A look, a feel, and a tactile brand is where all of the emphasis goes on in the real estate space. And I don't know whether now, this sounds like an old guy at 43 years of age now, whether it's a generational thing, but it seems as though there is less of an emphasis, Josh, when you and I were 20 years of age, in terms of we focus far more on the brand experience side of things, which is what do people feel and what do people say when they either pick up the phone and they have an interaction on the telephone with Phil Harris or Josh Phegan. They hang up the phone and go, you know what? I don't have a house to sell because I just rang Phil regarding a buying experience. I haven't got anything to sell. But can I tell you, one day if I ever was going to sell a home, based on that interaction, I would definitely be calling that guy in 5 years' time. And I've had so many of those calls over the years where that was the experience. Just as what's the interaction on the telephone? What's the interaction via email? What's that interaction via SMS, post open home? What's the biggest branding experience we probably have, Josh, is open homes. I mean, how many open homes do you just said before you went to an open home and it was a complete fail, in terms of that experience. And so, yeah, my experience in the real estate space is all of the energy, all of the focus, all of the resource, all of the capital is spent on the tactile experience, but there's nowhere near as the same pound for pound consistency in the same energy, effort and resource into the actual customer experience.
So I was with a sales rep the other day. I said, okay, great. So I go to your open house. What happens after? I don't know. I said, okay, great. So do I get an SMS after? Yeah. What's in the SMS? Well, I don't know. I said, okay, great. Well, put me in as though I was an attendee and I want to show you what turns up on my phone. And it turns up and there's a link and you click on the link and it goes to the website. I said, but I can't buy a copy of the Pest and Building Report. Why is that? Oh, well, because we had one owner who didn't want their address on the internet. So we had to turn off Pest and Building Reports for all properties currently available for sale because we wanted that one owner to not have their address show, which it would if people were buying a copy of the Pest and Building Report. And you're like, so 40 other people are massively disadvantaged because of what one. So you need definition of who you're trying to serve here. And I said, because it's kind of crazy that you have not even seen the SMS that the system, in inverted commas, sends to know what's actually going out on your behalf. And so you become the customer. Really basic idea. I dare you, Phil Harris, to add you to the Harris Real Estate website database thing. And I want you to become a past client, a past market appraisal, a buyer seller, just a buyer, a first home buyer. And I want me to tell me what actually happens from your people and whether or not there's any service variance.
I'd love to say that it was great, but I know that experience would vary. I know on some, depending on which people I was attached to, I'd get a great experience, and then from other people, I'd get no experience. But
so that's the individualism, right? But what's the bare core?
So what's the core? Sorry, elaborate the question.
So when you say what's the bare core, so like these are the things that need to minimum happen. So I was working with this young girl the other day, and she's phenomenal, great energy, good momentum. Early 20s, she's really going to go far. And she said to me, Josh, I've got to really book appraisals. So I said, okay, great. You need to book a minimum of 5 appraisals a week. So we went out there was no tomorrow, and 2 weeks ago we got to 4 appraisals in the week. It was killer. It was awesome. She's working in a team. And then I said to her on the Friday, I said, okay, great. Well, next week you need to get to 10. And she's like, you're kidding. I can't even, 4 was really hard and I pushed. And how am I going to get to 10? I said, all you got to do is just ask at the open. What do you mean? I said, so you get the opportunity to be doing a number of opens inside of this team that you're working in. Every buyer that comes through, have you bought locally before? And what are your plans that are existing? Just ask that. Just do that with everyone. And then if there's a chance and there's not too many people around, hey, any chance I can come and see yours? Just roll out those 3 questions over and over and over again. Anyway, late Saturday afternoon, I get the text. You wouldn't believe it. I booked 3 appraisals today. So then on Monday, we spoke and I said, how'd you go? She goes, I've already got 3. I've only got 7 more to go. Let's go, Josh. We're on. And, we got to the end of the week and it was 7 appraisals that she ended up booking in total.
Just because you asked the question.
Asked the question. And so would you like fries with that is a $1 billion question for another organization. Yeah. So my expectation in terms of brand, service, experience and delivery is that if I walk through a Harris Real Estate open for inspection, I expect that outside of first name, surname, email, mobile number, whatever, that you can ask me a very basic question on, have you bought in Adelaide before? Yeah. And what are your plans with your existing when you buy the next? And then if there's appropriate time and there's not too many people around, hey, any chance I can come and see yours? And so across the, 200 opens that you guys do every Saturday, I just want those 1, 2, 3 questions to be asked. That's all I'm asking. That's brand experience. And by the way, when we say that an open home is 10 o'clock, we expect that the doors are open, the signs are out, the flag's blowing at 10 to the hour, because being open early is better than turning up and fumbling with the keys. And so this is interesting. There's a guy by the name of Michael Pally, you'd know very well, and very successful agent. And when I first did some work with Michael, he would talk about his Saturdays and he would sell multi-story houses. And that was a thing I'd never heard of in Albury because we never had multi-story houses. And he had a team of 7 on a Saturday. So he had 2 people that would go ahead. He'd have like the 3 people that would then work the open with him, so up and down the level, so 1 on each layer. And then he'd have 2 people that would then stay behind to lock it up. And so they would bounce from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 to 6 to 7 of these beautiful big houses in Sydney. And like that's what it was all about. Is
that
double
bay, is he? Like, was
yeah, double bay. So it's about prime timers.
Yep.
So when you're in the prime time, and by the way, some of those people that are opening or locking up might not necessarily need to be a licensed real estate agent. They're there as the prep team or the post team, whatever. But how do you actually start to really think about where the peak is? And this is the thing, like you already know if a property is going to be popular. You can tell by the inquiries leading up to that first open home. So we've been doing this thing at the moment in terms of brand experience design where we've been saying to people, okay, so Phil, this is so we're going to jump into the listing presentation pitch, right? So these are my first 2 questions. Phil, lovely to see you here this evening. Before we begin, let me ask one very simple question. How can I help? And we just think the customer will just spill their guts. Like, well, I'm moving to Noosa and got a job relocation, blah, blah, blah. Secondary thing, Phil, have you already chosen an agent? Well, Phil, that's exactly why you're here. We want to go with you.
Great.
If that happened at minute 2 of the listing preso, that's phenomenal. Now, I get a lot of agents, no, that'd never happen. Well, it doesn't happen if you don't ask, right? So you start thinking about what it is you're doing.
Josh, I was saying before, I was at a leadership conference in LA going back a couple of weeks ago, and one of the lady gave a whole phenomenal lady who sold a business for over $1 billion, a cosmetics company, and her presentation was all about how boldness trumps intelligence, saying not that you can be a stupid person, but once if you're a relatively sensible, smart person, a whole lot of kind of in the sales industry is people just don't ask.
Yeah.
Like just have boldness, like ask the question.
Yeah. So I love this. And then if we go down, and now it's about layering these little USPs through stories. So in a book called Stick by Dan Chip, they talk about storytelling, right? So I feel we're a little bit different here at Harris. What we do is we launch all of our properties on a Tuesday. The reason why we launch a property on a Tuesday is that we have our first open for inspection as either a twilight or a midweek open for inspection on either the Wednesday or the Thursday. What we found is that really desperate, highly urgent buyers are checking every day. When they see that property is all of a sudden available, they then come to that Wednesday open for inspection or the twilight open, and then they like it. And then by the time we get to the first weekend of open for inspections on that Saturday, we've got buyers coming back for a second look who already saw it on Wednesday when the rest of the general population buyer pool is turning up. And then we put some, and I'm not sure if you've noticed, but at every single one of our open homes, we have a tape measure on the bench to encourage buyers to pull out the tape measure and start measuring a wall to drive the sense of urgency amongst the buying pool. Now, Phil, it's just a little thing that we do that gets a big result. Now, to me, this is like, that's a brand story, isn't it? It's an experience curve that you're creating.
Yeah, and then on top of that, like we spoke about before, it's like if you can have those conversations in a lounge room, the brand experience needs to be, if that's what comes out of your mouth, Josh, you need to deliver that. So when that vendor actually turns up and goes to one of your open homes, you'd best be delivering what you spoke about, right? And
so that this is like minimal amount of variance is about service standards. So I used to work at Sanity music stores, and within 30 seconds of someone walking into the store, you had to have made eye contact with them and either said something to them or given them a little wave to acknowledge that you saw them. And we were taught that from 15. So they walk into the store, hey, lovely to see you. If you need any help today, let us know. Feel free to have a bit of a browse. Like it was just a design thing that we would actually go to do. So why is all of this sort of stuff important? Well, when you start thinking about it, is that, what's actually happening is that the real estate industry has all been, potentially a lot more ego-driven, in terms of its brand development. But yet if you go to London, there are some phenomenal brands. You start thinking about the Foxtons, the Marsh & Parsons, the Paramount, like the conversations around Red Brick, what these businesses are doing are phenomenal. And yet it's very hard to name the people that work there. So that's the UK model. And then that's often because they're paid a very small percent, like 10%, for example, of the total sales fee. Versus in Australia, that can be more like 50% and even greater. And in Australia, it tends to be that we've got a brand, but beyond that, then we've got personal brands that work there. And sometimes in businesses, you see that the personal brand is amplified to like 100-point typeface, and the brand they actually work for is like, 3-point typeface. Is there a bit of a mix here about what's important, because the agent believes their brand, their photo, and that's the age old, hey, my photo needs to be on the signboard, Phil. Like that style of conversation. Is that do they really get branding, or are they in a position that they feel like it's branding because they're seen and they're about and they're in that market?
Well, it's interesting you say that. I think I've definitely experienced, Josh, over, particularly the last, 5 to 7 years. I feel like the agent has become more so of the brand than the actual agency. Not that the agencies, I think of the Harris brand, of what our responsibility is. We have a responsibility to our customers, and we're talking about salespeople in this instance, that we do need to provide a very, very tight brand. We need to, provide something that is, acceptable across multiple markets. And in the marketplace that we serve in Adelaide, we serve middle to high end, and we serve, one particular lower price marketplace as well. But it's interesting that the brand that we offer is a service platform to our salespeople. But I've certainly noticed, Josh, the trend of our salesperson is now the brand, but Harris has to provide an acceptable level of brand behind that to support them in their journey.
And so, great example of that, Purple Bricks was in Australia. That would be what I'd go to call a low-end brand. Then you've then got Christie's Great Estates or Forbes, and that was like a really high-end brand, and Sotheby's, like that style of conversation. And understanding where you sit in the middle of all of that, like where is your brand proposition? So you got to get clear about where you're going to be. So when we entered as a training company, there was a particular event that people would go to, we'd call Sex and Sizzle, like a lot of energy, a lot of momentum, but not a lot of content. There was also a training business that was around that was very, very detailed and would tell you the percentage of funds that you should spend on staples per year. Very dry, but great insights, but very dry. No sex, no sizzle. And when our brand designer decided, they said, we want you in the middle. Sex and sizzle with substance. So that was the design. So we wanted timelessness. So we wanted to be Chanel, like black and white, but yet accessible. And so that Josh Phegan iconology has not had to change over the course of the last 17 years. Now, I've had branding people come to me and go, oh, you need a brand refresh. It's tired. It's XYZ, blah, blah, blah. And I said, okay, great. So I'm going to chuck 200 grand your way. Tell me what changes in terms of the sales numbers, the client engagement, and what about the 5,000 videos in my library that are now all going to look old when you do a brand refresh? And every single time they seem to back away from the merchandise quite quickly because they realize the business model is actually successful. Now, that doesn't mean that we can't change it up a bit in terms of the stylization of our videos, the music that we use, the animation that we use for that logo's arrival. Like there's lots of things that you can do that are elements to modernize what we're doing on the day-to-day, but in all end, there's a classic look. And so when I do brand design, it's okay, great. So I'm going to ask you a couple of questions, and I just want like very straight, direct answers from you. Predominantly, do you have a preference between auction or for sale?
Auction.
Opens or private inspections?
Opens.
Okay, vendor paid marketing or agency funded marketing?
VPO.
Okay, videos on property or no video?
Video.
Okay, professional photos or amateur videos?
Pro.
Okay, great. If you started to say long-winded copy or dot points?
Dot points.
Do you prefer QR codes or people to have to type in a long web address?
A QR.
Okay, if you're in a position you think about signage, do you like large signs or small signs?
Large.
Okay, do you think you should have a photo on the signboard or no photo?
Photo.
Should the agent have their photo on the signboard or no agent photo on the signboard?
No photo.
Okay, so black and white or colour?
Colour.
Okay, right. So see how like literally in under a couple of seconds we're starting to build out the brand attributes. Have you given any thought to how that actually looks? Now, why that's important is that then when you look at your scaling effort, 150 plus, whatever it is in terms of people that work in sales and property management, you start to think about, well, do they actually get and understand that that's actually our brand philosophy and our approach? Now, if you fail to define, someone else defines it for you. Now, Phil, you might remember that there was actually an era where there was a real estate brand in Australia that was no opens, no auctions, set for sale prices, no vendor paid marketing, and they literally caused a massive issue in every market they operated in, because if you were pitching against them, you actually had to have a pitch against all of those things on why you would be the opposite. And everyone else was in that pool, and then there was one that was clearly out.
Who was that, Josh?
So that was Neil Gemmin.
Yes, I was going to say that was Neil Gemmin, right?
So when you start...
we had and I think there were different brands, but under the Neil Gemmin system. Is that right?
Correct, yeah. So Gemmin approved was back in the day.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Now, whether or not it was right or it was wrong, and whether or not it was a Purple Bricks or not, or whether or not they got really good fees, and often they ran very successful practices, the lesson is this, is that you can't fail to define. So you've got to make the decision about where you want your brand to sit. Now, high-end premium, no problems, but it's easier to go high-end premium and come back than it is to start really low and work up. And so like literally, so I always say, okay, great, And there's a great Tom Peters quote here is that literally if you're not planning on being the cheapest, then how are you planning on winning? It's going to be through design. So the custom experience design, and how is that packaged? So Paul Arden would say, is that how do you package, market, and develop yourself so that you are desirable?
It's an interesting conversation because I think about what we've done inside the Harris organisation, Josh. When we started, you would remember, like our marketing was very brash and very bold and almost kind of on a tacky side where everything was pink, if you remember, right? Mm-hmm. And I'd say that, you know, and back then our average sale price, we were very much sitting middle of the market. Now, over 13 years of trading, we've very much now started to drift into more of the three-quarter high-end part of the market. And so we've seen a brand transition to suit that part of the marketplace. Mm-hmm. And I can certainly support what you're saying. So with the evolution of the Harris brand now, a lot of just very clean, simple, black on white, you know, because the majority of the properties we're selling are a lot more high-priced property. But we can definitely relate to the fact we can sell down, but you can't sell up.
Interesting conversation. If you walked into a training room and you only had to use your eyes and I was not physically visible and you were just looking on the screen, could you tell whether or not it was a Josh Phegan slide?
Unequivocally.
And if you're in a position that you were walking towards a training room and all you could hear was the sound of the music before the event, could you tell if it was a Josh Phegan event?
Absolutely.
So that's a great example about brand design. So do you have a Harris Spotify playlist that people actually played and open for inspection?
We have actually got one somewhere. I know it was made. I don't know if the guys are using it, but I know we did have one at some point. But it's definitely you will not get consistent playlists across Harris Open Homes. I can't tell that for you, Josh.
So I think that like the great conversation is an interesting one. I know that upstate on the Northern Beaches they've definitely got their own playlist, so you might be able to share it, Phil. But the base, I'm sure that Pete Mosdale won't worry about that. But when I think about this, you know, what is a brand? How do you go about building one? Understand the difference around the personal brands. You know, where's the bias? So Adidas, Nike, Puma, Lululemon on running, you get it. What do consumers actually connect with inside of your marketplace? And ultimately, you know, where does it fall in terms of the price and value proposition? And if you set the intentions right, then you have the opportunity to really build something truly great. And I think about this as like brand is absolutely critically important to get right. And I, for example, in the very early days, made the decision to go blue suit, white shirt. And that was a decision because I wanted to be accessible to all markets. So whether or not I'm working in a low socioeconomic environment, whether or not I'm in a very high-end environment, whether or not I'm in the great sites of London and Dubai or Melbourne and Sydney or in regional Victoria like Daylesford, I have to be able to connect with everyone. And I don't try to dress to stand out and I don't try to dress to separate. I try to dress to fit in and to make people feel really confident and comfortable with who they're working with.
I go the blue suit and white shirt as well, Josh. That's because I'm colourblind.
Yeah, that's true.
I had to stop rocking up in different coloured pants and tops. Anyway.
Yeah, that's a great one, mate. Our final principle today, people don't buy from a brand, they join them. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, definitely. I think that... probably my final thoughts. And I found today it's been a really great conversation for me as well to hear your insights around branding, Josh. I really feel that you're a master. I know it's something you've studied deeply. I think for me, it's something I've really learned along the journey, but it's definitely about holistically looking from my perspective at your brand and encompassing everything, understanding that the natural tendency is to focus more on the tactile, but think of, you know, your personality, the way you talk, the way you speak, the way that you present, the way you treat other people around the office. Like that's it's all brand, you know. And I think about
from how you talk to a receptionist to someone who's just starting in your team doing admin through to the highest performer in your organisation, right?
100%. So I think, you know, if I look at the success that Harris Real Estate has had inside the organisation, I think that part of it has stemmed from my own personal brand, which is the way you treat people along the journey.
And I think true professionalism, like there is no doubt, like your desire to want to be the best in the world at what you do has been an insatiable component to building out that Harris brand and what a platform. Like there's been nothing that I've seen internationally that's done so well in a very conservative market.
And I think the other thing as well, Josh, I'm sure you're like, I feel like your brand is continually evolving. You are never there. So no matter what your brand is, I feel like you're only ever 80, 90% complete in terms of brand. It's a continual evolution of, technology changes, platforms change, experiences change. And so I think it's something that you've got to continue to look at. Final question for you, Josh, before we wrap here, from Where's your greatest source of inspiration for real estate brands? What do you look at? If you said, what are your top 2 or 3 brands you continually keep an eye on that keeps you inspired on look, feel, aesthetic?
Outside of industry, I think is probably the most important mechanism. And I look a lot at high retail environments and restaurants because they're dealing with lots of people on a regular and consistent basis. And that's where I get a lot of things that you can see that a hotel will do or a restaurant will do that like I could easily do that inside of my business. And then from a real estate brand perspective, obviously some of the greats like Compass have been pretty phenomenal in America.
Amazing, yeah.
But has it translated into bottom line profitability? Not yet, which is a long 10 years, right? But yet a phenomenal looking brand. And this is what
And that's that conversation, Josh, about, incredible tactile experience, but obviously there's a mismatch between tactile versus actual customer experience, right?
Well, what a lot of people got to realize is that customer experience should equal fee growth. And if you can walk in uncontested because people have had great brand experiences, that makes a huge difference about the overall performance of what it is that you do. And I'm often reminded of that. Like someone would say, oh, Josh, you don't do much advertising on Instagram or Facebook these days, blah, blah, blah. We're sold out 18 months in advance. Like what else do you want? Like the metric that we use for success continually gets hit. And that's not at an ego level. It's the truth. That's what actually happens. Why? Because of the consistency to play this way for 17 years and to do it time and time again. Like that's the most important part. So I think that you said something to me which was quite inspiring. You said, Josh, anyone can do it for a decade. Do it for 5. So, okay, great. Well, I'm nearly edging the edge of the second decade, Phil. I got another 3 to go.
And you're going to get there, Josh. And I look forward to for riding the journey with you.
Awesome. Feeling good and ready for more? Thanks for joining us
on Dream Big,
Move Fast.